3 weeks after returning from Chillingham Castle, I was finally beginning to believe the Foundation had run out of impossible assignments. My report on the Order of the Crown had been sealed under director-level clearance. The surviving evidence had been archived, and life inside headquarters had settled into something almost resembling normality. That illusion lasted until Director Hale called me into the briefing room before sunrise. Whenever Hale requested a meeting before dawn, it usually meant someone, somewhere, had discovered something they wished they hadn't. The room was almost dark, apart from a large holographic map projected across the center of the table. Southern France slowly rotated beneath layers of satellite imagery, historical maps, and Foundation survey data. I recognized the region immediately, Gevaudan. Even before Hale spoke, I knew exactly why I had been called. The beast had never been classified as paranormal. Every previous investigation concluded the attacks belonged in the unresolved historical archive rather than active Foundation operations. Whatever had changed was serious enough to reopen a case that had remained untouched for decades. Hale enlarged the map until hundreds of small markers appeared across the forests and valleys. Each one represented a confirmed attack between 1764 and 1767. Alongside them were modern sensor readings collected over the previous 6 months. At first, the two data sets appeared completely unrelated, but then Hale activated another layer. Thin bands of blue light spread beneath the landscape, revealing fluctuating boundary energy extending through the forests like underground rivers. Every historical attack had occurred within meters of those energy signatures. "We're not looking at a predator," Hale said quietly. "We're looking at a boundary rift." The words hung in the room. Since joining the Foundation, I had investigated hauntings, mimic entities, ancient relics, and places where reality had become dangerously thin. Boundary rifts were different. They weren't locations haunted by something unnatural. They were tiers between worlds. Most remained microscopic and collapsed naturally before anything could pass through them. On rare occasions, however, a rift became stable enough for something on the other side to find a way across. Those incidents almost never ended well. Foundation satellites had detected the Gevaudan rift only 12 days earlier, after a sequence of unusual electromagnetic pulses appeared beneath the forest canopy. The readings were weak, suggesting the fracture had only recently become active again. Yet, when analysts compared its position against historical records, an uncomfortable pattern emerged. Every major attack attributed to the beast fell within the rift's area of influence. No previous investigation had possessed the technology to recognize what they were seeing. To the people of 18th century France, it had simply looked as though something monstrous was roaming the countryside. "There is one problem," Hale continued as another series of files appeared on the display. "The energy signatures don't match the attack reports." He opened the first reconstruction. Using modern Foundation software, analysts had recreated one of the earliest killings from witness statements, terrain surveys, and forensic modeling. The simulation showed a small, unidentified creature emerging briefly from an area saturated with boundary energy before attacking a lone traveler. Less than 30 seconds later, a second life form entered the scene from the surrounding forest. It was far larger than the first, moving with astonishing speed as it pursued the smaller entity away from the victim's location. The reconstruction ended there because the historical record contained no surviving witnesses beyond that point. Every reconstruction produced the same sequence. Something emerged from the rift. People died. Then another creature appeared moments later, chasing whatever had crossed into our world. By the time frightened villagers reached the scene, only one large animal remained anywhere nearby. History blamed the beast because history never saw what it had been hunting. Hale closed the files and looked directly at me. I don't want you to hunt the beast, Adam. I want you to find out what it was protecting us from. Less than 24 hours later, I arrived in southern France under the cover of a joint geological and environmental survey. The Foundation preferred explanations that attracted as little attention as possible, and a temporary research camp in the mountains was unlikely to raise questions from local authorities. Scientists, surveyors, and forestry specialists moved naturally through the area, while concealed monitoring equipment quietly searched for evidence the public would never understand. If the rift had become active again, we needed to know before anything else crossed into our world. The forests of Gevaudan were exactly as the historical records described them. Steep valleys disappeared beneath dense woodland. Ancient paths wound between isolated farms, and every ridge seemed to hide another stretch of untouched wilderness. It wasn't difficult to understand why the events of 1764 had terrified an entire region. Standing among those trees, surrounded by endless silence, it felt entirely possible that something could watch your every movement without ever revealing itself. The temporary Foundation command post had been established inside an abandoned forestry depot several kilometers from the center of the anomaly. Unlike operations involving Echo 7, this was a standard containment division deployment. Their role was investigation first, intervention only if absolutely necessary. Portable sensor arrays surrounded the camp, continuously monitoring fluctuations in boundary energy, while reconnaissance drones quietly mapped the surrounding forest. Nothing unusual had been observed since the team arrived. Yet every night the instruments detected the same brief surge of energy shortly after midnight, before the readings faded again. The lead scientist greeted me inside the operations tent and immediately began replaying the previous night's recordings. At exactly 12 minutes past midnight, every boundary sensor registered a sharp increase in activity lasting just under 40 seconds. Thermal cameras captured nothing unusual. Wildlife monitors recorded every bird and animal in the area falling completely silent, and motion detectors briefly tracked several unidentified life forms moving through the forest before disappearing without trace. Whatever had entered our world had done so quickly, remained only a short time, and then either returned through the rift or escaped into the surrounding woodland. By late afternoon, I was walking the perimeter with a handheld boundary scanner, comparing the live readings against historical maps recovered from Foundation archives. The closer I moved towards the center of the forest, the stronger the fluctuations became. They weren't constant like those surrounding an established paranormal site. Instead, they pulsed gently beneath the ground, almost like ripples spreading across the surface of a pond. Something was disturbing the boundary from the opposite side, probing it repeatedly without yet forcing it completely open. As dusk settled across the valley, I reached a small clearing marked on 18th century records as the location of one of the earliest confirmed attacks. There was nothing remarkable about it. Wild grass covered the ground, old oak trees surrounded the clearing, and birdsong echoed through the fading light. Yet the scanner in my hand suddenly emitted a sharp warning tone as the boundary reading climbed rapidly beyond anything recorded elsewhere in the region. Before I could investigate further, every sound in the forest stopped at once. The silence lasted only a few seconds before a movement caught my eye between the trees. A creature no taller than a large dog stepped cautiously into the clearing, its pale skin stretched tightly across an unnaturally thin frame, its limbs bent in directions they shouldn't have, while dark eyes scanned the woodland with frantic desperation rather than aggression. It hadn't noticed me. Instead, it seemed terrified of something following its trail through the forest. The scanner alarm intensified as a narrow distortion shimmered into existence behind the creature. The air itself appeared to tear apart, revealing a jagged fracture no wider than a doorway. Beyond it lay only darkness filled with shifting shadows that refused to remain still. The small creature looked back towards the opening for a single moment before bolting deeper into the clearing, as though escaping whatever waited beyond the rift. It never made it more than 20 meters. A deep growl rolled through the forest, followed by the unmistakable sound of something large moving through the trees with astonishing speed. The pale creature froze instantly. It wasn't preparing to attack, it was preparing to flee. The animal burst from the trees so quickly that my eyes struggled to follow it. It crossed the clearing in little more than a heartbeat, moving with the speed and confidence of a predator that had hunted these forests for centuries. Moonlight caught its coat as it emerged from the darkness, revealing thick reddish fur, broken by a darker stripe running the length of its back. Its shoulders stood far higher than those of any wolf I had ever encountered, while its powerful tail ended in the distinctive dark tuft described by countless witnesses more than 250 years earlier. For the first time in my career, I was looking directly at the creature history had named the Beast of Gévaudan. The smaller entity reacted immediately, abandoning any thought of attacking me and sprinting back towards the rift with astonishing speed. The beast ignored my presence completely. Its attention never left the fleeing creature as it accelerated across the clearing, covering the distance between them in seconds. The impact echoed through the trees as both disappeared into the undergrowth beyond the boundary fracture, followed by snarls unlike anything I had ever heard. Branches snapped, leaves exploded into the air, and then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the forest fell silent once more. I approached cautiously with my scanner raised, expecting to find the aftermath of a violent struggle. Instead, the ground was littered with strange black residue, already evaporating into the night air. The pale creature was gone, without leaving so much as a bone behind, while enormous paw prints surrounded the disturbed earth before continuing deeper into the forest. They matched almost perfectly with casts preserved from the original Gevaudan investigations. The historical witnesses had described the beast accurately all along. They had simply arrived too late to see what it had been chasing. Back at the command post, the sensor logs confirmed everything I had witnessed. The rift had opened for exactly 43 seconds before collapsing naturally, During that time, one unidentified entity had crossed into our world, followed less than 30 seconds later by the appearance of the beast. Every reading suggested the larger creature had not emerged through the rift itself. It had approached from somewhere within our world, as though it had been waiting for the boundary to weaken. The moment something escaped, the hunt had begun. Foundation analysts immediately compared the event against every surviving attack report from the 18th century. A remarkable pattern emerged. Many victims had been found with injuries inconsistent with large predator attacks, while nearby vegetation often showed signs of violent movement extending away from the scene rather than towards it. Contemporary investigators had dismissed those details as confusion caused by panic, but viewed through the Foundation's reconstruction software, they painted a different picture. In case after case, there were signs of two separate creatures occupying the same location only moments apart. The implications were impossible to ignore. The people of Gevaudan had witnessed only the final moments of each encounter. They found a massive unknown predator standing near the dead and naturally concluded it was responsible. None of them had seen the smaller entities emerge from the rift, and none had understood why the beast always appeared immediately afterwards. History had condemned the hunter because no one realized there had been another predator hidden in the shadows. The following morning, Director Hale authorized a full containment operation. The evidence was now overwhelming. The beast was not the source of the killings. It was an ancient hunter, one of the rarest orders ever recorded by the Foundation, existing for a single purpose. Whenever a boundary rift weakened enough for hostile entities to enter our world, the hunters pursued them relentlessly until every last creature had been destroyed. They did not distinguish between nations, borders, or centuries. Their loyalty belonged only to the boundary itself. Our priority had changed completely. We were no longer investigating a historical mystery. We were dealing with an active rift that had remained hidden beneath the forests of Gevaudan for more than 250 years. If it continued to weaken, more creatures would inevitably escape into our world. The beast could hunt them one by one, just as it always had, but eventually even it would be overwhelmed. The only permanent solution was to seal the rift itself. Unlike the global incidents handled by Echo 7, this operation fell under the Foundation's Regional Containment Division. Within hours, heavily disguised transport vehicles arrived, carrying engineers, containment specialists, and portable boundary anchor systems. To anyone passing nearby, they appeared to be forestry contractors responding to a protected environmental incident. Hidden beneath the equipment were the devices designed to stabilize fractures between worlds. Every member of the team understood exactly what was at stake. If the boundary collapsed completely, history could repeat itself on a far greater scale. As the anchors were positioned around the clearing, the boundary scanner suddenly screamed to life. The air rippled once again as the rift tore open far wider than before, revealing a darkness that seemed to absorb every trace of light around it. 3 pale creatures emerged almost simultaneously, moving with frantic speed as they scattered through the trees in different directions. Before the containment team could react, an unmistakable growl rolled across the forest. The beast exploded from the undergrowth, intercepting the nearest creature with incredible force before immediately changing direction to pursue the second. The remaining entity charged directly towards the Foundation perimeter. Containment officers raised their weapons, but held their fire, knowing conventional ammunition was unlikely to stop something that did not fully belong to our reality. Instead, they activated the boundary anchors. Brilliant blue arcs of energy spread between the devices surrounding the rift in a widening circle of light. The unstable fracture began to collapse in on itself, dragging loose branches, leaves, and fragments of black residue back towards the opening. The final creature reached the edge of the shrinking rift, only to be struck from the side by the beast, sending both crashing into the fading distortion moments before it sealed completely. Silence returned to the forest almost instantly. The boundary readings stabilized. The strange electromagnetic pulses disappeared, and wildlife slowly began returning to the surrounding woodland. We searched the area for hours, but found no trace of either the pale entities or the beast itself. Only the enormous paw prints remained, leading away from the clearing before gradually fading into the ancient forests of Gevaudan. Whether the hunter had survived or simply continued its endless patrol beyond our sight, none of us could say with certainty. My final report concluded that the historical events of 1764 to 1767 had been fundamentally misunderstood. The evidence indicated that the creature remembered as the Beast of Gévaudan had not been responsible for the majority of the recorded attacks. Instead, it had been engaged in an unseen war against hostile entities emerging from an unstable boundary rift, arriving too late to save many victims, but relentlessly pursuing the creatures responsible. History judged the hunter because it never witnessed the prey. The official Foundation response sealed the Gevaudan rift under permanent observation, with regional containment teams assigned to monitor the area for any future boundary fluctuations. The public would never know what had really happened in those forests more than 2 centuries ago. They would remember only the legend of a monstrous beast that terrorized France. Sometimes history records the creature everyone can see. The black files exist to remember the ones no one ever did.